Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. I hope you're having a great day and a great week. I am happy to be back with you for another author interview. Things here are going well. I had my hubby and I had an unexpected date night over the weekend, which sounds weird, right? We went to the market in a nearby town to get some fruit and a few things, and while we were there, we actually ran into two different sets of friends, which was cool, but one set of friends told us about an event that was happening that night in another little town that's near us. It's a candlelight event where they have, I think the website said something like 12,000 candles, but the candles are in the shape of different, so they're in different shapes. So one of them was actually in the shape of a Chihuahua head. You know, we have Chihuahuas, and the theme this year, in that section, it was Mexico. That's why they had Chihuahua. They had some of the wrestling masks. I know there's a proper name for them. I'm blanking on it right now. And just a lot of really cool, I know I'm not describing it well, but it was very cool. And we walked around, we explored a part of this little town that we had not really explored much before. And there were different stages set up with music. And yeah, it's like a 3 or 4 night event, and we didn't know what was happening. So it was really cool that we ran into people who knew about it, told us about it, and then we had an unexpected date night on Saturday night. And then Sunday we had lunch with some friends. Actually, we had lunch with Elizabeth Stanley, who has been on the podcast. Elizabeth Romero Stanley was on the podcast a few months, it's probably more than a few months ago. You know how time flies. But we had lunch with her on Sunday and a few other friends. They invited us over, which was lovely as well. So that was our weekend, and now the week is flying by. Haven't felt great this week. Oof, you don't want to hear about that. So we're going to talk about books instead, because you do want to hear about that. And I have returning author Anna J. Stewart joining me today. We are talking about the first book in a new series. It is the Hawaiian Romance series. Let me double check that. The book is called Her Island Homecoming. And the book is Hawaiian Reunions series. And it is, we've had some great thrillers, some great suspense lately. We've got some dramas, historical fiction. And this is a romance. It's got some heavier topics in it, but you know what? I just needed something a little more on the light side. Anna and I talk about this, where there's going to be a happy ending. It's going to work out in the end. And I needed that in my reading life right now. So this was really good timing. But let me give you the description. Again, it's called Her Island Homecoming. The author is Anna J. Stewart. And here's the description. If she stays, will he stay too? From sand in his shoes to a gecko eating his dinner, Theo Fairfax is way outside his comfort zone in Hawaii. Sent to convince pilot Cindy Calvert to sell the tour company she just inherited, he finds himself being won over by the tight-knit community, the natural wonders, and Sydney's free-spirited beauty. Could exploring their growing feelings lead to a future as magical as a tropical sunset? So that is the description. As I said, it is the first in a new series. We're going to talk about the arc of that series, how many books there might be, etc. So let's go ahead. As I said, definitely needed this. It's very sweet. Love that it's set in Hawaii. I have been to Oahu. I have not been to the Big Island, which is where this one is set, but Just a beautiful setting, nice romance, and of course, there's bumps along the way, but you have to get through those so you can get to your happily ever after, right? Let's go ahead and turn now to the interview so Anna can tell you more about this book and this series. Hi, Anna. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here with you again.
I'm happy to have you, and we're going to talk about a first book in a new series. The book is called Her Island Homecoming. Before we get to the series and that book, though, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about yourself for those who maybe need a refresher or didn't hear the first interview so they can get to know you a little bit.
Sure. My name is Anna J. Stewart. That's the name I write under. I write primarily for Harlequin's heartwarming and romantic suspense lines, and I also write for Arc Manor's New Kasich romance imprint. So I write sweet romance and then spicier romantic suspense and then even spicier, darker romantic suspense for Arc Manor. So I kind of write a little bit of everything within the romance genre.
Yes, you do. And it rolls off your tongue very well. You must have said it once or twice.
I'm getting used to it. The more
Yes.
I do, the more I do of these, the better. Yeah.
Well, here we have romance, not really suspense. So this is on the softer, sweeter side.
Definitely.
Can you give an overview first of the series as a whole?
Sure. As a series as a whole, it's the Hawaiian Reunion series, and it revolves around a group of friends who, after the death of a mutual friend who owned a tour company in a small town on the Big Island of Hawaii, he passes away unexpectedly, and his last wish was actually to bring them all back to the island to become partners in this company. They're all in different phases of their lives, of course. They're all, living their dreams or think they're living their dreams or in flux or, life presents the opportunity for them to come back to Nalani, the little town I created. And as the series progresses, they all come back and find their happily ever afters. And this first book features, Sydney, Calvert. She's a pilot, actually. She's a search and rescue pilot living in South Carolina, getting ready to start her own flight school when she finds out her brother has passed away. And when she comes back for the funeral, which is actually how the book opens, she shortly after learns that he has left her Ohana Odysseys, which is the tour company. And from there, she discovers his plans to bring everybody else back. She sends off emails and her friends start returning. But in the meantime, there's a company who wants to buy out Ohana Odysseys, and they send their accountant to do a financial evaluation to see if it's a viable investment. And that turns out to be Theo Fairfax, who turns into Sydney's love interest. So hijinks and fun and games kind of ensue. And it's just a lighthearted, fun, low angst, kind of romantic comedy. There's a lot of lighthearted moments in it. I just wanted to write something fun for a change. And this one kind of fits the bill.
Yeah. The last time you were on, we talked about one that was, it still had its fun moments. It still had its quirky moments, but there was murder. So
yeah,
it's nice to just have, I don't particularly like the phrase beach read because it sounds kind of limiting, but like just that easy to read, nice to know that you're going to have some good characters and a good story and a happy ending, because that's what we read these types of books for, right?
Absolutely. That's what romance is all about, is the happily ever after. You don't know how you're going to get there, but you know what the end result's going to be. Exactly. And there's something to be said for that, for a fulfilled promise. So.
Right. And, normally I wouldn't say they're going to get together at the, you don't give the ending of a book away normally, unless you're talking about a romance, because that's, again, why we read them.
Absolutely.
Let's go ahead and take our first break for this episode, now that you know a little bit more about this series. When we come back, we'll be talking about the inspiration behind Sydney and Theo's story. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. As you know, I am speaking with author Anna J. Stewart about her book, Her Island Homecoming. Let's go ahead and return to the interview. Obviously, the inspiration for the series is the death of Remy, and bringing everyone back. What was the inspiration for Sydney and Theo's story?
Well, they're each characters in different phases of their lives, and they each are pretty sure of where it's going, at the start of the story, which I think most of us usually do. It's those unexpected things that provide adventure and fodder for stories like this. But Sydney is, locked into her future. She's worked really hard to get to where she wants to be. And her brother's death really throws a monkey wrench into that. So she's left evaluating what's really important in life and whether or not her dreams are worth chasing after at the expense of a dream that her brother had been chasing, to really help improve the lives, or not improve, but to help support the town that they both grew up in and that he had continued to live in his entire life. So she's got some self-examination to do. And then Theo is a character who's very buttoned down. He's an accountant, so he's a numbers guy. He's very logical. And he is not a fan of the unexpected, which makes free-spirited Sydney an interesting match for him. And he's just there to do a job, and he wants to climb the corporate ladder. He has his plans also, but his life is very, unexciting, unassuming. He lives a very regimented, scheduled life, and then he shows up in Nalani, where he discovers that island life is a completely different way of living, obviously. So it's an opposites attract trope. And it was just really fun to watch these two characters kind of come to terms with what they thought their lives would be versus the opportunities that they're soon faced with to make their lives even better than they imagined.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk a little bit more about this setting, because it is Hawaii, and lots of people maybe either have been there on vacation or want to go there on vacation. Maybe they even want to live there. Sydney doesn't necessarily want to return. Theo hates the beach.
He does. He hates
great.
the sand.
I live at the beach and I hate sand. I love the beach, but I hate sand. So Theo and I are like little soulmates right there. Have you spent a lot of time in Hawaii, or was it just kind of a setting that felt right for this type of series? Can you talk a little bit about the setting?
Sure, absolutely. So I have been fortunate to go to Hawaii a number of times. I think I've been might have been four or five times, but my first trip was when I was 8 years old, and my mother and grandmother, we went there for Christmas. So we spent Christmas in Kona. That would have been like 1978 or there. And it's one of my greatest childhood memories, is that trip and being on the islands. And in the times I've gone back, it's one of the few places on the planet that I've been where I step foot off the plane and I feel like I'm home. It's just perfection. And, for me, when I was, I had written the last Butterfly Harbor book for Heartwarming, and cause there were 12 books in that series. So I was really wanting to write someplace new. And my first idea didn't really fly with my editor. And I said, well, we haven't done anything set in Hawaii. How does that work for you? And she said, great, put together a proposal. So I got to, and Hawaii really is another character in this book. I wanted to pay as much homage to this place, to the people, and to their traditions, as much as I could. Hawaii was probably a bigger inspiration this time around than any of the characters. If only because it does mean so much to so many people, the people who live there, the people who travel there to vacation. And, it's the only other place other than where I live in California that I would ever want to live. If I had the means, I would move to Hawaii in a heartbeat. Just because it feels as if someplace that I just belong. And I think that's intentional from the people who live there. They always are so welcoming and so friendly and so willing to share their way of life out there. So it was both a privilege and a responsibility to convey that on the page for this series of books.
Yeah. I've been to Oahu, but this takes place on the Big Island. Is that the place you like to visit best, or just where you decided to set the book?
You know what? I have actually not. Oh, I've been to Hilo. I haven't been back to Kona since 1978. So, the idea of doing Oahu, it had a more big city feel because Honolulu is such a city. It's such a city, within the islands, and every place else has a little bit more, tropical feel to it for me. So I wanted something that wasn't hustle and bustle and that was very, laid back and relaxed. And, yes, you can feel that on Oahu, but I think on the surrounding islands, you get an even bigger impact of that. So I definitely wanted to play. And also the Big Island is kind of still, becoming with the volcano eruptions, parts of the island are still being formed. So, that's something I actually plan to address in a future book in the series, is the fact that the islands are ever changing with the environment and everything else. And it's important to pay attention to that. If for no other reason that it shows us where the islands might be heading.
And which is just fascinating. The fact that the world can still be changing that much, and in a way we can see,
Yes.
So Hawaii is definitely its own character, but back to Sydney and Theo. You've talked about them a little bit. What about them both as individuals and a couple do you think is going to resonate with readers?
I think it's the fact that one is in an unexpected time of transition and the other is faced with transition and the choice of where do we go from here. And I think a lot of people have been experiencing that, especially over the last few years. Life can throw curveballs at you at the most unexpected times, usually at the most inconvenient times. And how we stand up to those options, I think really helps to define us as people. So Sydney has a lot of decisions to make, whether or not to continue her brother's dream, whether to sideline her own dreams, because it's not just her future that's at stake. It's also the people of Nalani, including her brother's girlfriend, who will be a future character in a book. And accepting the offer of change for the better it can be scary, but it also just opens so many doors. So I think people who are looking for a read where the characters are coming face to face with unexpected moments in their lives and how they face them down and not only conquer them, but accept them. And also at the same time, find the other person that's going to make that journey all the more enjoyable.
It's time for our second break of the podcast, but it's a lovely note to end on, isn't it? Don't we all want to find that person that's going to make the journey more enjoyable? Whether that's a romantic partner, a platonic partner, there are all kinds of relationships and all kinds of journeys. So, finding that one person that really seems to fit wherever we are on whatever journey we're on is always a wonderful feeling. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the theme of grief in this series. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my interview with author Anna J. Stewart. Because they're all coming back to the island after the death of someone that we as readers don't know because he's died already at the beginning of this book.
Right.
Grief is obviously going to play a part in a lot of stories. Do you find that ever challenging to kind of walk that line between these are romances and they're sweet and lighthearted, but you have the darker element of grief and dealing with grief as a part of the series?
Well, I think that's part of the reason I wanted to set the series in Hawaii, is because Hawaii also offers a very healing environment. It's very nature focused. It's very, come back to what matters place. And yes, they're all grieving in their own way, but grief is not, it's the unifying factor, I think, around them, because they all want to pay homage to Remy and to what his ideas were for Nalani and the islands in general. But, his death is kind of a catalyst to them, reinvestigating their own lives and not taking a single moment for granted. So while yes, grief might seem like a dark element within the stories, it's also a very unifying element, not only for the characters, but for readers in general. We've all lost someone, at some point in their lives. And we've all had to work through that however we do. And fortunately in these series, community and family and the friends that they're surrounded with helps them to move through that a little bit more easily.
Yeah, thank you. How about research? Any particular types of research? I would imagine maybe piloting a helicopter, but any research?
That was the main thing I did research for this book. And I spent a lot of time on YouTube, and there are some really funny, learn how to pilot a helicopter in 6 minutes videos, which was but the great thing about that was I got to learn about all the different parts of the helicopter, and, depending on how many seats it has, this is, where things are in the helicopter. And it was really, really interesting. And the great thing about it, because I hate to fly, it's like, I'll do it, but I hate it. This made me a lot less leery about taking any of those helicopter tours that they have in the island. So maybe I'll do one next time. But, it was fun watching them and then making sure that my characters were doing the same things that I saw them, as far as lifting up with one hand and piloting the stick with the other hand. And then there's 2 pedals for the feet, and one takes you forward and it's really intricate, but it was really challenging, but also fun to figure out how to put Sydney into the air authentically, which is really what I wanted to do. And then, probably the other thing I got to research, number one, was where I wanted to put the town on the Big Island. So I put it about 30 miles from Hilo, which is on the east coast of the island. And it's kind of right between Hilo and where the volcanic, activity is taking place at the moment. So, which of course that happened right after I finished the first book. So I didn't get to include that in that book. And then I also got to look into all the flowers and the natural aspects of the island and all the creatures. And there's a little creature in this one. He's a little island gecko, gold speckled gecko, is I think what his breed is. And his name is Noodles, and he lives in the little cabin that Theo, our hero, will be staying in. So he ends up with an unintended roommate. And I love playing off that with animals. And I've seen so many cats and dogs and rabbits and goats and stuff like that. I wanted to do something different. So a lizard it was.
Well, the gecko is just perfect. I love that because they are everywhere, and they're going to be in your kitchen. They're going to be in wherever you are, there's going to be a gecko, and you can't, I imagine people who don't like, I'm going to say bugs. I know that they're reptiles, but people who don't like bugs are probably really freaked out by geckos, but I loved them. I thought they were adorable.
Yeah. And it was so much fun I love putting, characteristics into animals and making them part of the cast. That's always a lot of fun.
Absolutely. How many books will there be in this series?
So far the plan is for 6. I am playing around with a couple of more ideas, so it's possible it could go more. I hadn't planned on writing more than 6 again, because when I wrote 12 for Butterfly Harbor, I thought that's way too many books and I'm ready to move on. But the longer I stay in Nalani, the more I'm really enjoying it. So I have a feeling it'll probably be more than 6, but as of now, it's 6. And I've written the next 2. Book 2 will be out this fall. Book 3 will be out next March, and I'm getting ready to start on book 4 right now.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. You mentioned that you are currently working on sounds like several things, but anything that you want to talk about that you're currently working on?
Well, like I said, I'm going to be starting book 4 of the Hawaii series, and we're getting ready for a new Christmastown release, which Christmastown is a sweet romance collection I write with a bunch of other authors from Heartwarming, and it's led this year by Melinda Curtis and Carrie Lynn Webb. We've all written in Christmastown for going on, it must be 9 years, because Christmastown started with my very first book, Christmas Actually. And this year we're doing Lights, Camera, Christmastown, where they're filming a TV movie in Christmastown based on one of the previous stories. So we kind of got to get a little meta in there with all of the involved. And what we do with this series now is we have a chunk of time, and each story takes a couple of days, but it goes in chronological order. So each story stands on its own, but each picks up after the last one ends. So it's almost one big story, just broken up into 10. Is it 10? Maybe, I think it's 8 stories this year. I can't remember how many authors, because we have them coming and going in the sets, but that'll be out in October. So Lights, Camera, Christmastown. And then after that, I'll be writing a new Blackwell book, which is a continuity series I write with Melinda Curtis and Carrie Lynn Webb again, and also Carol Ross and Amy Vastine. And those are sweet westerns. This will be the 4th series of books that we've done that include a set of close-knit family members with one big story, but each book has its own storyline.
It is time for our final break of the podcast, and when we come back, we'll be talking about the second book in the series that we talked about the first time Anna was here, which reminds me that I did not tell you, if you have not listened to that interview and you would like to, it is episode number 377. So if you want to listen to that interview and hear more about that series that we're going to talk about after the break, then episode 377 is where you want to go. In the meantime, you are listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with author Anna J. Stewart. You know what? I just blanked on the series that we talked about the last time you were here. It's the one that takes place in Hollywood with the murder.
That's Exposed.
Exposed, yes. Second book in that series?
Second book, it was originally supposed to come out this month, but due to a couple of different reasons, we pushed it back to November. So it'll be out November 21st. This one is called Vanished, and it picks up a couple of weeks after the first one ended. According to my editor, she says it's better than the first one, which I haven't gotten edits yet. So I'll wait and hold judgment on that. But it was really challenging to write a romantic suspense where the heroine has an 8-year-old child. So working a child into a romantic suspense was much more of a challenge than I anticipated. but I'm really happy with the way it turned out. So, and it has a really good leap off to book 3.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, I can imagine an 8-year-old. You don't want to go too dark or any direct, like I can imagine.
Right. Yeah. It was an interesting balancing act for sure.
Yeah. Since this series is romance, you do write in other genres, but what draws you to writing in the romance genre?
Well, first of all, I think it's that guaranteed happily ever after. I know my grandmother was a big reader of mysteries, and she would always flip to the end to see who was still alive. And you don't have to do that with romance. You really do just get to go for the ride. And also, we spend so much of our lives connecting with other people. And at its heart, romance is really about relationships, whether it's the person you're falling in love with, whether or not it's the family you belong to, whether or not it's your circle of friends. Romance is all about relationships and how we interact with one another. So I think for me, somebody who really enjoys diving into the human psyche and what makes people tick and why they behave the way that they do, romance for me is just a natural fit. And then being able to pull in other types of genres like thrillers or romantic suspense, and I'm even kind of playing around with a horror idea at the moment. Romance will always be at the core of whatever I write, but it's also a universal language. I think most people, whether or not they think they like romance novels or not, most things are going to have an element of falling in love, because isn't that what most of us do in our lives? So that's really what attracts me to the genre.
Mm-hmm. Even in Exposed, which is a little darker and does have the murder, large murder conspiracy component, there's still some romance. But what I like about that series and where I see this series going as well, the Hawaiian Reunion series, is there's the romance, but there's also a core group of friends and friendship.
Yes.
And I think those relationships are important to highlight as well.
Absolutely. And that is at the core of everything that I write. Honestly, that family is what you make. It's not necessarily what you're born to. That is 100% what my books are always about, whatever subgenre of romance I'm writing.
Absolutely. Which Ohana Odysseys, right? Ohana, as everyone who's seen Lilo and Stitch knows, means family.
Exactly. And it was very purposely named.
Yes. So since we've talked last, in any free time you can eke out, what have you been reading for you?
You know what? Not a whole lot for pleasure, unfortunately. I've been keeping up with the J.D. Robb books because those are my personal addiction. I'm way behind on Nora Roberts books, which is unusual for me, but I've been reading a lot more craft books than I have been. And I recently came across the Trope Thesaurus. I think it's Jennifer Hill is the author. And it's like opened up my brain in a whole new way when it comes to choosing the kinds of stories that I want to tell. So, yeah, in whatever free time I have, I've really been trying to work on, improving my craft and finding new ways to write as far as the types of stories that I want to be telling.
I am also so far behind on the J.D. Robb series. I need to get back to it. She's just too prolific. Nora Roberts.
She really is.
J.D. Robb's.
I know.
So, in terms of internet presence, I know you have a website. So give the website as well as any social media people can find you on.
Sure. It's www.authorannastewart.com. All of my social media links are there. If people really want to keep up with me, I'm on Facebook at author Anna J. Stewart, and I'm on Instagram at Anna J. Stewart. Twitter is such a hellscape right now. I'm still there at AJ Stewart Writer, but I don't know for how much longer. I keep waiting for the whole app to kind of implode. So, but Facebook and Instagram, the best way to keep up with me is through my newsletter, which you can sign up for right on the homepage of my website. And, every issue always includes a giveaway to subscribers. You have to open it to find out if you're one of the winners, but newsletters are always the best way to follow authors. Cause it's the one thing we have in our control that won't get, blocked or phased out by algorithms.
Right. And fewer trolls on a newsletter.
That's true. Yes.
Yes.
A lot fewer.
Well, Anna, we've talked about a variety of things, but is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to make sure you highlighted during this time?
I don't think so. Just, if you like Sweet Christmas Town sweet romances that take place at Christmas, check out the Christmastown books. They're currently on Kindle Unlimited. I don't know for how much longer. And then the new book will be out in October. And in the meantime, just sign up for my newsletter and you can keep up with everything I've got coming in.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And thank you so much for joining me again to talk about Her Island Romance and writing in general. I so appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, thank you once again to Anna for joining me, not only for this episode, but for the previous one, which led to this episode. We talked about two very different series in her 2 visits, which is always very fun. But this one, of course, if you're looking for straight romance and something that is lighthearted, sweet, not without its more difficult issues, of course, because life contains joy and grief and everything in between, then you should definitely check out Her Island Homecoming, and then you'll be ready to read all the others as they come out as well. Or maybe you are, now that you've heard the interview and you didn't hear the first one, you're interested in more suspense, so you want to check out Exposed, or really any other of Anna's books. Maybe you're getting ready for Christmas. It is July. You can have a little Christmas in July with her Christmastown series. I love Christmas, and I love Hallmark Christmas movies, and I love books that feel like Hallmark Christmas movies, so I will definitely be checking those out come around Thanksgiving time. And anyway, thank you, Anna, for joining me. I really appreciate it. I hope that you all will join me for the next episode. We're going back to historical fiction, back to World War II. I'll be speaking with Mark Ellis about his book, Dead in the Water, so join me for that interview. As always, if you are a fan of this podcast and want to help me out in any small way that you can, there's a couple things you can do. You can like, follow, subscribe, what have you, on the platform that you listen to this podcast on. By doing that, you'll always know when there are new episodes. You can also leave a review. That review can be written, starred, whatever your options are and your comfort level is. Either way helps to get the podcast out to more listeners. And of course, then you can follow on social media. The podcast is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Of course, I love hearing from you. I love hearing what you're reading. Tell me if you are a mood reader or if you are strictly on your TBR, like you have a TBR that is in order and you will read those in order, or if you have a TBR and you just kind of peruse it until something strikes your mood. Or are you a theme reader? Do you read something different in the summer than you read in the fall or the winter? Tell me what you're reading. I'd love to hear it. So find the podcast on social media. In the meantime, and as always, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that your week is going really, really well. I hope that you are getting some sunshine and some serotonin and some vitamin D. But it's not too hot and that you're not spending too much time in the sun, of course. Balance is key. But hope you're having a great week. But whatever you're doing, I hope that you find lots and lots of time to get yourself lost in a fabulously good book. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.